Thank you so much for joining us here today. We at NASA are getting so excited for Earth Day, so we just wanted to chat with you today about some of the new exciting Earth science missions that we have coming up and some great announcements. So today I have with us here NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, Karen St. Germain, Division Director for NASA Earth Sciences, and Tom Wagner, Associate Director for Earth Action within our Earth Sciences Division. So as I mentioned, we have some exciting things to discuss with you today. We'll announce some new airborne science missions. We'll announce new elements in our Earth science strategy, as well as a new visualization from our PACE mission, Plankton, Aerosol, Cloud, and Ocean Ecosystems. But first, I'll kick it over to Administrator Nelson to give us a little bit more information about what we'll hear today.
Well, you know that we are a climate agency. In addition to being a space agency, an aeronautical research agency. And that's because we have these 24 instruments and satellites on orbit that look at the Earth and look at it and bring us data real time within a matter of seconds that it takes the transmission from the satellites back to Earth. We have all put together this Earth Information Center to try to bring this information to the public, not only in a physical structure such as here at NASA headquarters, but also at one of the Smithsonian institutions. But we bring it virtually as well to people, up to the minute, real-time data on what is happening to the Earth as seen by our spacecraft. And we're trying to bring the understanding that this is a precious, precious planet. It's one in our solar system around our star called the sun. And we can see from space, we can see what's happening to the Earth. When I flew in space 38 years ago, even with the naked eye, I could see the effects on Earth coming across Brazil. I could see the color contrast in the upper Amazon region where they were cutting down the trees. And in the same window of the spacecraft, I could look to the east, to the mouth of the Amazon River, and I could see the result of that extra silt that was flowing hundreds of miles out into the Atlantic. Same thing coming across the island nation of Madagascar off the southeast corner of Africa. Back then, they'd cut down all the trees. And when the rains came, there weren't any roots to hold the topsoil. All the topsoil's running down the rivers, and from space looking down on Madagascar, you could see the result of that so easily, of all that silt coming out of the rivers into the bright blue waters of the Indian Ocean. And one of the effects that happened to me personally was I became more of an environmentalist when I went into space. Today, on the occasion of Earth Day coming up, we have a couple of major announcements. We're going to show you, and our experts here are going to tell you about this new spacecraft that we put up called PACE that's showing us all the phytoplankton in the waters of planet Earth. You're going to see some of that phytoplankton that's all stirred up by the currents. You're going to see in one case, well, there it is. That's the tip of Africa. And look at all that phytoplankton that hugs the coast until you get to the very southern tip. And lo and behold, that is the confluence of two oceans. The Indian Ocean to the east, the Atlantic to the west, and when they meet, the waters swirl. All that phytoplankton is caught up in that swirl. And by the way, is it any wonder at the tip of Africa, it's a place where there's a concentration of great white sharks and also whales. And I think you can see real time from PACE, our instrument in space, why that is. PACE is also looking at aerosols. That's one announcement. We've got another announcement today, and it is that it's an Earth Venture program that will fund 6 new airborne missions. Dr. St. Germain's going to go into the detail, but I can just tell you, on the north slope of Alaska, the Arctic coastal change, that's one. What about what happens when we get all these wildfires that we've had? And all that smoke goes up and it creates clouds. Clouds created by fire. What about the urban air pollution? And we sometimes, if you go to a place in other parts of the world, you don't even want to breathe, and you certainly don't want to go outside unless you've got a mask, which, by the way, I've been wearing recently in my jogging in Washington, D.C., because there is so much pollen here, and you can hear it in my voice right now. We also are looking at, from our airborne platforms, how drought and rainfall are affecting and shaping land. What about glacial ice? I'll never forget, 15 years ago, I went to Greenland, and I went up on that glacier, and I could see how that glacier, as the scientists were telling us, how it was moving, and it was coming into the sea. And then agricultural emissions. And we take our instruments in space with regard to agriculture very seriously, because we can help farmers. We can tell them what's the moisture content of your soil, what you ought to be planting, how you can plan for the drought that's coming, how much water do you want to reserve, what kind of crop ought you to plant on this soil with this moisture content. So that's all a part of what we're going to announce today. Thanks, Faith.
Thanks, sir. As you can see, we have a lot of exciting things to talk about today, but Karen, wanted to get to you. I know earlier this year we launched our PACE mission. Last week we got to see those exciting new images, but we have a new visualization that we're going to show today. And if you could just tell us why that's so important and a little bit more about PACE.
Thanks so much, Faith. You know, we were super excited for the PACE launch, and even more excited now, just a few weeks later, to see the first data coming out of the mission. We just released data to the science community, which is really where the power of these observations begins to be unleashed. So PACE is a mission that measures some of the tiniest things that have some of the greatest impact. In the oceans, phytoplankton, these are small plant-like organisms that are some of the earliest organisms on Earth. And there are hundreds of thousands of types of phytoplankton. They form the base of the food web in our oceans, and they also are responsible for taking carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere. The carbon dioxide combined with the nutrients in the water and the sun's light creates the plant matter itself. That's how the plants grow, but it also releases oxygen into our atmosphere. And the other thing that PACE observes is aerosols in the atmosphere. Aerosols come from a lot of different sources, from smoke from wildfires or dust blowing off the Sahara. Aerosols in our atmosphere trigger, they form the nucleus for clouds, they reflect the sun's light, and actually they can form some of the nutrients that phytoplankton need to eat, or to grow, sorry. By the way, the word phytoplankton actually comes from 2 Greek words, and it means wandering plant. So, phytoplankton move through the oceans, but they play as important a role in our global system as all the plants on land play. So PACE is giving us our first really detailed look, and now we have an animation that we'll tee up for you to show you for the first time some of the global data. Can we run that animation again? There we go. So this is the PACE instrument, the ocean color instrument. So it's mapping in great detail the color of the water below it. And we're going to zoom in here off the coast of the U.S. So the first thing we're looking at is the greenness. This is a measure of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is that component of the plants that converts the sun's energy into plant matter. But we can also see not just that things are growing, but what kind of things. On these two animations, we're showing you different types of phytoplankton, and they behave differently in the environment. And those polarimeters that measure aerosols, they can detect things like smoke. They can detect different types of aerosols, and they can determine how large those aerosols are, where they are in the atmosphere, and all of these different attributes, all these different characteristics of aerosols matter a lot when we talk about how much sunlight they're reflecting, what kind of clouds they'll create, and so forth. So PACE is giving us this unprecedented view of the tiniest critters in the ocean, the tiniest particles in the atmosphere, but in both cases, they play an enormous role in aquaculture, in fisheries, in human health, in our everyday lives.
Yeah, that's definitely amazing that we've been able to progress, so much. And I know we also launched SWAT not too long ago. That's also studying, some of those same things. How will those kind of work with each other to increase the data that we're getting?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, the visual that Administrator Nelson opened up with actually shows how biology and the physical movement of the oceans, which is what SWAT sees, how those work together to drive the phytoplankton into other regions. And they, again, because they are the bottom, they form the base of the food web. Where the phytoplankton go, where the oceans carry the phytoplankton, that's where the fish, the whales, the sharks go.
That's exciting. And I know, a lot of what we're talking about today is so important to let people be aware of. And in our communities, I know that we've recently announced our Earth Science to Action strategy. And Tom, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about that and what that means for NASA.
Yeah, and if you want to go on the web, you can see the strategy yourself. But what's important about it is this, right? We're going to build on what we do at NASA already with innovation and collaboration so that we can help users get the right data that they need at the right time. And also, too, it increases our focus on being user-centered, right? We want to co-produce with users what it is that they need. But the important thing about this right now is that we're at a pivotal moment, right? We have the challenges posed by climate change, but at the same time, we've got our 25 NASA missions on orbit. On top of that, we've got our international partners and also the commercial data. So we've kind of had this unprecedented view of the Earth. When you add to that all the amazing things that have happened in the information technology world, our advanced physical models, the potentials with AI and machine learning, we can now really answer questions asked at a very, very high level. And I want to give you an example of this. For example, think about if you ever made a fire, how wet or dry the wood is really affects what you need to do to get the fire started and how fast it burns, right? Well, it turns out farmers need this kind of information and firefighters need this kind of information, but they need it in very, very different ways. Let's take the farming example. Farmers need to know how much water they need to irrigate their fields and also how much fertilizer to go along with this. We've partnered with a group called OpenET to take satellite data, especially Landsat, to give farmers a field-level view of the dryness of the fields so they can make very precise decisions about how much water to put onto the field. That saves them money directly, but what it also does is preserve water, that precious resource, especially in the drought-stricken parts of the country. But now let's take the firefighting case. Very, very different. They're trying to think about the status of the fuel itself. How dry is that wood? How likely are we to have a fire? Also, how much wood is out there? So what we do for firefighters is we assess those things ahead of time. And then on top of that, what we do is during the fire itself, we will go and track where the fire is and think about where it's going. And then afterwards, we look at the intensity of the fire to think about what the restoration is going to look like. Did the fire get so hot that it destroyed all the seeds? What should the effort look like to restore those areas? But we don't just work in those areas. We work in health and air quality, disasters, sea level rise, even energy now, and a host of other areas. We don't go it alone, right? We work with our critical partners at NOAA, Department of Interior and USGS, Department of Energy, National Science Foundation, Environmental Protection Agency, and others. And we're working at the user level, right? Our goal is to create solutions that people use, and we want to co-produce those.
That's fantastic. And I think Administrator Nelson mentioned earlier, some of those new airborne science missions that we're announcing today. And I think that plays a part into that about how we can truly see around us, the ways that this is affecting us. And Karen, I was wondering if you don't mind diving a little bit deeper into those new missions.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a very exciting announcement for us. Of course, we much of what we do uses that unique vantage point of space to see the whole globe. But we perform science at multiple levels, and including from aircraft, and that gives us an ability to do detailed studies, to understand how phenomena are operating, how the Earth is operating at the local scale. And that can be really important to help us understand what our satellites are seeing from space. But it can also be really important to understand very specific questions. So we run regularly these competitions for the best ideas on airborne campaigns, science questions we should go after, and what instruments we should use to go after those questions, and then also, what partners should be involved in those experiments as well. So today we're announcing 6 new selected airborne missions, airborne campaigns. They'll take place over the course of the decade, so they're staggered out over time, and some of them take more than one experiment to accomplish the science. So I'll walk you quickly through, with just a little more detail, the 6 that we selected. So the first one is really going after Arctic coastal change. One of the things that we're seeing with the warming climate and changes in weather patterns is also changes in the way water flows across our landscapes. And that's not true. It's true nowhere more than in the North Slope of Alaska. So this will be the City College of New York leading these observations to really understand the changes to the river systems on the North Slope of Alaska. And one of the cool things about this one is it's not just aircraft. This campaign will also include helicopters, boats, and drones. So it'll be a major campaign. The second one is looking at, and I think, Tom, you mentioned this, the fact that if a wildfire is hot enough, it can create its own weather. We call these clouds pyrocumulonimbus. So the pyro being coming from the fire, and then the cumulonimbus being, they're tall. These are really tall clouds. The Naval Research Lab will lead this study on how these clouds form when wildfires burn hot enough to make their own weather, and this set of experiments will be principally over the western United States and Canada. The third one is really going after urban air pollution, and this one will be led by Langley Research Center, and it will capitalize on the synergy between another launch that we had recently, which was the Tempo mission. So really understanding at the neighborhood scale, what are the pollutants that can affect human health, and how can we get better at forecasting those conditions and informing public health policy. So this will range. The locations for this one will be North America. One location we know will fly is over Mexico City, which you'll be visiting next week, sir. Another thing that's happening, we're seeing more and more, is these changes in weather patterns that we're seeing are also changing the landscape itself. One of the ways this can happen is, for example, a wildfire clears vegetation, but then when precipitation comes, we see landslides and those kinds of major events that change the shape of our Earth. So Shifting Weather, Shifting Lands is the name of this one, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory will look at droughts and rainfall and how they affect the stability of hillsides, the soil, the rocks, the vegetation, and the landslides that can result from these changes in the way water's moving around the planet. So really exciting and really important at the local level. The fifth one is really looking at, so you mentioned retreating glaciers. We're looking at retreating glaciers. This one will be run by the University of Arizona. They'll lead this project to track the retreat of glaciers and ice sheets in ways that will help us improve our predictive capability there. We'll be traveling to Alaska, Greenland, the Canadian Arctic, and even one of my favorite places, the island of Svalbard, to really understand how these glaciers, the rates of flow, the rates of retreat are changing. And the last one will be really focused on agriculture. It's called Farm Flux, and it'll be run by Goddard Space Flight Center. Researchers will measure fluxes of greenhouse gases and other emissions and an absorption from our farmlands. So a set of 6 very different airborne campaigns that'll take place over a number of years and give us some really targeted insights to help everything from how we understand how the Earth works to how we put that science into action for people.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for laying all those out. I think it's, so important and a testament to how NASA really is a climate agency and how we're doing all of this to help everyday people. And, we're doing this all in anticipation of Earth Day next week. So just wanted to hear from each of you about what Earth Day means to you. Sir, if you want to start.
I remember 2 things. First of all, I remember when we saw Earth from a completely different perspective, and it was on Apollo 8 as Borman, Lovell, and Anders are coming from the backside of the moon for the first time as they orbit the moon, and all of a sudden they're coming back into the Earth's sunlight, and they see Earth. And Bill Anders is just shouting at the top of his lungs, "Look at that, look at that. Where's my camera, where's my camera?" And from that, we have the perspective of our planet, which is so beautiful, so colorful. And then I think of one of our early space missions that went to the far reaches of the solar system and is now, we've got 2 spacecraft that are really out in interstellar space and are still communicating with us, by the way. On those 2 spacecraft, it takes 22 hours for the signal to reach our dishes in Canberra, Australia. But as this spacecraft is starting to go in the outer reaches of our solar system, the scientists decided to turn the camera around and look back at Earth. And Carl Sagan describes it as a pale blue dot. And that's home. That's the place that is our home, our planet. It's the only planet we have, and we want to keep it. And so that's why we are trying to offer NASA's expertise and the other agencies of the federal government to give us the information that we need in order so that we can be better stewards of what we have.
Yeah, Karen, what about you?
Well, I can't top that, boss. But you know what I will say is I love Earth Day. I was talking with a group of students this morning, and I was saying I think it's a shame that there's only one Earth Day per year, but there's a Sunday every week. Not cool. Not cool. Anyway, look, I love Earth Day because it's an opportunity for us to share, to show people how the Earth works as we can see it from space. And it's a unique perspective. And I will tell you, you talked about how beautiful our Earth is, and it surely is. But it only gets more beautiful when you understand how it works. At least to me, that's part of the beauty. That adds depth to the beauty. And so this is a day when we get especially to share that with many more people. And, you know, when I go down to our Earth Information Center, right here at NASA headquarters and opening soon at the Museum of Natural History, and at Kennedy Space Center, again, this is one of those ways that we can show people the Earth as we see it, share what we understand, and for me, that's about hope, because you know, a lot of folks know that the climate is changing, and that's impacting their communities, and that can be discouraging. And one of the things that we want to do is say, hey, when we understand what's happening, we can make decisions. And a community that can learn is a community that can adapt, can move forward, and continue to thrive. And that's really what I'm hopeful about on Earth Day.
That's awesome. Tom, do you want to share?
Yeah, it's tough to top those. But, you know, to me, the big thing about Earth Day is it's a time to reflect a little bit, right? And the fact is, the planet isn't just changing, it's already changed. But I feel like we have the tools, we have the knowledge, we have the wherewithal, not only to deal with the change that's already happened, but also set about trying to make the world a better place in the future. You know, and I have children, and I think about that a lot. And I'm hopeful because of that, but I'm also hopeful because, you know, even in my lifetime, we've addressed these global challenges. You know, things like when I was a kid, we were really worried about whales. We were really worried about the California condor. We were also really worried about the ozone hole, you know, and those are all things where we've made progress. And that's what gives me hope for the future.
Great. Well, we've been able to hear a whole lot, but now I think that we do have some questions that can be asked for you all. So I'll start with one. Administrator Nelson, maybe you can kick us off with just telling us how what we're doing right now, these Earth science missions, will be impactful in the future for the Artemis generation.
Go to earth.gov, and there is a compilation of information that will give you the up-to-date information as well as a perspective of what is happening to the Earth. Everything that we've been talking about, most of that information you can see on earth.gov. I think this all plays into Earth Day, which is your question, but Earth Day is every day, and it ought to be every day. And so please use these tools that we have created, starting with the Earth Information Center, which now becomes a part of earth.gov.
Great. And Karen or Tom, I know, you know, NASA is kind of coined to be a space agency, but, you know, we know that we study so much more aeronautics or earth science. How long has NASA been studying the Earth?
60 years. 60 years ago, in the two first mission areas that NASA got into as a result of that recognition that, hey, space isn't just about going out there, it's about seeing our home planet in a new way for the first time. So that Earthrise photo that you talked about, sir, that gave rise to this notion that we can study how land is changing. So what is today the Landsat series is one of the first uses of space to study Earth, as well as weather satellites. So 50 to 60 years for both of those mission areas. And then we've added along the way studying many other aspects of the system. Want to jump in, Tom?
Yeah, I was going to say one of the fun things we did recently around the office was we went back and we looked at one of the NASA videos from the early 70s about what the Earth observing systems were going to look like. And it's amazing that we've really built it, you know? And I think about even in my time, like I started my career in earth science in the kind of late 80s. And over that time, we've gone from, you know, those just the pictures of the Earth to try to understand it, to starting to make these fundamental measurements in the 90s. You know, then you get to the aughts and you start to like really understand Earth processes. And now today, with all the missions, we have data covering all different areas of science, right? From the deep part of the Earth to the top of the atmosphere. And we've got the tools to interpret that and figure out what it really means. Like, people can use this data in their daily lives to solve problems, right? So it's a very exciting time to be in this field and thinking about where it's going to go next.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just hearing about those decades that we've been studying the Earth, I mean, how are these new projects and missions that we're announcing, how has that technology or those lenses transformed since then?
Yeah, you know, as you were talking, Tom, I was thinking about sea level. Because when I was a graduate student in the, should I say the year? I guess I will. Sure, why not? In the early 90s, we launched the first ocean altimeter. This is a satellite that transmits a signal. That signal bounces off the ocean surface and comes back to the satellite. And by measuring that time of flight, we can measure very precisely the level of the oceans. We launched the first of those missions. It was called Topex Poseidon in the early 90s. And I was a graduate student, and I played a very small role in the calibration and validation of that mission. 30 years later, I started this job, and my first launch was a satellite called the Sentinel-6 Michael Freilich. It was the continuation, I think the sixth in line of those ocean altimeters. And from that record, we now understand over 30 years of exactly what's happened with sea level. Prior to that, what we had was tide gauges in coastal communities. We didn't have a global view. But when we talk about the new technologies, we now not only have been measuring sea level rise for 30 years, but we have those complementary missions. A gravity mission, which tells us how much of that sea level rise is due to water leaving ice sheets and glaciers and getting added to the ocean. And we also, because we measure temperatures, we know how much of that sea level rise is because the ocean is expanding as it warms. And this is really the key, coming back. The diversity of these observations that we make from all of those satellites and those airborne campaigns, it gives us a view of not just what is happening, but why it's happening. And we know it because we measure it. And that is just incredibly powerful to me.
Yeah, and only to build on that point, we've made tremendous advances in how we display the data and give people access to it. As the administrator pointed out, if you go to earth.gov, one of the things you can go and see all the amazing data on greenhouse gases. I mean, there's even a touch screen where you can scroll in and see where things are being released from. We've got a sea level rise portal. We have other portals out there. And again, we work with the other agencies on this, right? We work closely with NOAA to take the latest satellite data, help improve weather reports. And again, to fill in the gaps in places, we buy commercial data, right? It allows us, for example, to see in areas where we have a lot of cloud cover, where commercial provides a lot of access, we can see through that cloud cover. And we spend a lot of time at headquarters kind of trying to knit all that stuff together and get as much of it out there as we can.
Yeah, and you mentioned working with NOAA and Administrator Nelson. You mentioned some other government agencies that we work with to, bring this data to people and to study our Earth. I'm wondering, with some of the missions that we have coming up this year, for instance, NISAR that we partner with internationally, why is it, sir, so important that we partner with other agencies and international partners to study our Earth?
Because we all inhabit the Earth. For example, our NISAR mission, which is going to look and calibrate changes in the Earth's surface. We're doing that as a joint project. It's one of the great observatories. A combination of all this couple of dozen instruments in space are giving us the great observatory. NISAR with the Indian government is another point of reference. And then what we're going to do is we're going to become more sophisticated. We're going to combine all of this data over time into a 3D, very precise composite of what is happening to our planet. And again, it hopefully will have the end result of making us better stewards of what we have.
That's great. I know we mentioned NISAR, Karen or Tom, what else do we have to look forward to with Earth Science coming up? I know we rolled out those 6 new missions today, but what else can we look forward to?
Well, I'll just build on the NISAR point first, because you're right. This enterprise of understanding the Earth, it is one that we undertake with countries around the world. NISAR will be the most sophisticated radar we've ever launched. It will be able to see changes down to, less than half an inch in position of land, which moves up and down, in positions of, in vegetation, forests, glaciers. We'll be able to see changes that are very, very detailed. And we would not be able to do that if we weren't doing it with an international partner. In other words, when we work with our partners, we can do much more than the sum of what we could do individually, and that is critically important. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the other things that you're going to see, right, is every day we get better at using the data to answer critical questions. And with the new missions, like let's just take SWAT, right? That's going to be a powerful tool for us to understand, like even things like inland flooding, soil moisture. There's a lot that's going to come out of that. With the PACE mission, we're going to be looking at harmful algal blooms, right? Trying to understand what causes those, trying to do a better job with forecasts. And you're only going to see more and more things like that coming out in the next few years.
Nice. So we look forward to it. I think I'll end with one last question for all of you, or who wants to jump in. If there was a child or someone asking you, how can I specifically make the greatest impact to protect the Earth, what would you tell them?
I'll go. Yeah. Look, I'll tell you that, and I talk to school kids a lot about it. Every decision you make impacts the Earth, right? You turn off a light switch, that's a little bit less CO2 that went into the atmosphere. You choose to use a reusable bottle, etc. You are a part of the solution just by being a person who is attuned to it, and you can help make that change.
And I agree with that absolutely. And also, if this is a passion for you, you can grow up and join us in doing the work we do. It's not just important, it's exciting, it's fun. And we really want students out there today to be inspired by what they see and want to join us when they're ready to do it.
We are all citizens of planet Earth. We all have a responsibility of taking care of our homeland, and our homeland is the planet.
Well, I could not have ended on a better note. So want to thank you guys so much for joining us today. As you can see, we have a lot of great, exciting new Earth Science missions. We're getting ready for Earth Day here at NASA. And one of the cool things that we're doing, we have a social campaign called Global Selfie, where we're encouraging you to go out in your community and take a picture of yourself in your corner of the world with the hashtag Global Selfie. Bonus points if you include your favorite body of water, because this year NASA's theme for Earth Day is water touches everything. It's, over 75% of what covers the world, and it's so important that we study it, we learn it, we protect it. So in case you needed an example, we're going to take our own little selfie right here. All right. Well, want to thank you guys again so much for joining us. We're encouraging you to go out in your communities, celebrate Earth Day. I know at NASA headquarters here in Washington, D.C., we have some exciting events happening right here in our Earth Information Center all day. We have a lot of exciting things to look forward to, and thank you so much for joining us.